when it comes to the Dulce-based topic, it is really not about the base itself, since apparently and evidence-wise so far, it does not seem to exist, but rather about the various personalities that have initially promoted this myth. Now let's examine some of the enigmatic personalities, how it all started from around 1978 to 1983, and how, ultimately, deluded con artist Phil Schneider took advantage of the Dulce-based myth. Now Phil Schneider will appear towards the bottom of this page. Paul Benoit, he was the owner of Thunder Scientific Corporation, contracted to Kirtland Air Force Base, located right next to the entrance of Kirtland Air Force Base in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and presently operated by his sons. From around 1979, Paul Benoit began to witness some strange plasma-looking lights hovering over the Manzano underground nuclear storage area, not too far from his residence in the Four Hills area of Albuquerque. Now, some researchers, such as Greg Bishop, theorized that he was looking at some tests of Project Starfire, laser-based optical tracking system, as well as directed energy weapons research, allegedly being developed at that time by the Air Force Research Laboratory. The problem with this theory is that the Air Force Research Laboratory's Starfire optical range did not begin their projects until around 1994. Now, some others speculate that a contractor within the Sandia Laboratories next to Manzano Base were conducting some tests of prototype of remotely controlled aerial platforms, presently known as UAVs, but exactly what Paul Benoit witnessed and filmed are still unknown. Now, Paul Benoit later became convinced that those objects were somehow related to an underground base in northern New Mexico near Dulce, a suggestion seemingly pushed then by a Richard C. Doty of AFOSI at Kirtland Air Force Base. Articles on Benoit soon began to appear in newspapers such as the Albuquerque Journal and the Albuquerque Tribune. Now, Paul Benoit began to suffer from paranoia and was later institutionalized. He passed away in 2003. His remains are buried in Veterans Cemetery in Santa Fe. Paul Benoit's sons refused to be interviewed, the main reason being that Thunder Scientific Corporation still does business with Kirtland Air Force Base. They sell military-grade humidifiers and calibration instruments, many of which were developed, modified, and improved by the late Paul Benoit. Now, I'm not sure if Paul Benoit's wife, Cindy Benoit, still lives at the residence, which is located close to the original Manzano underground nuclear storage facility, which allegedly was closed down in 1992 in the Four Hills area of Albuquerque. Now let's talk about Myrna Hanson. In 1980, she claimed to have been abducted near Cimarron, New Mexico, and claimed to have been taken to an unknown underground location. She was at that time a resident of Eagle Nest, New Mexico. Paul Benoit interviewed her at his home together with Leo Sprinkle, who did a hypnotic regression. Now, Paul Benoit later on decided that she must have been taken into the Dulce base. This was allegedly only after Benoit begun to suspect that there was a base in Dulce. Later on, a Richard C. Doty, who was with Air Force Office of Special Investigations in Kirtland Air Force Base at that time, suggested to her that she might have been taken into an underground weapons storage facility in northern New Mexico. Now, Tom Tom Adams was investigating cattle mutilations in the late 1970s. Tom Adams first heard about the Dulce base from reading Paul Benoit's article in the newspaper and other sources from around 1981. It is alleged that Tom Adams knew Ann West, and let's talk about Ann West. Now, her true identity was not initially confirmed, although it was Tal Levesque who claimed that she had been on Facebook with a different name, Cherry Hinkle, who claimed that her half-alien cat has lived for 29 years. Now, she was said to have been an acquaintance of Tom Adams. Ann West, or Cherry Hinkle, claimed to have drawn the initial pictures of the bats of the Dulce base in 1987, yet claimed to have never heard of Paul Benoit before. She allegedly knew Tal Levesque. She also claims to have known a Thomas Edwin Costello. Tal Levesque claims that she visited him and his wife, and also Thomas Edwin Costello in Santa Fe. Now, Tal Levesque claims that Ann West was dangerous and was part of the invisible government. However, Levesque's claim that Ann West was part of the invisible government sure sounds like lunacy. Now, John Leer. Now, Leer heard about Dulce allegedly from Ann West. Leer befriended Tal through John Grace, also known as Val Valerian, in Las Vegas. According to Tal Levesque, John Leer retouched the Dulce drawings of Ann West that he received in 1987. Now, Leer first came up with his hypothesis in 1988 about Dulce and also about Area 51. John Leer has never taken or was never been taken seriously by the UFO community. Now, some people suspect that John Leer purposely throws us into some ridiculous sounding items as part of PSYOPs. Now, he recently claimed that there are cities on the backside of the moon. Now, let's talk about this enigmatic Jason Bishop or Tal Levesque. Here's a picture, the only picture of the enigmatic Jason Bishop, also known as Tal Levesque, when he appeared on a Japanese Nippon TV special for a 2-hour program on Area 51 and Dulce in March of 1990. Now, his real name is Thomas Allen Levesque. Levesque in French means the bishop, thus his AKA. Tal Levesque claimed that he worked in Santa Fe as a security person for a private company around 1980 or 1981. Now, he claimed to have been or have begun contact with Thomas E. Costello, who Tal Levesque claims worked in the same company in Santa Fe. Now, Thomas E. Costello allegedly revealed his secrets to Tal. The secret was that there was an underground U.S. alien biolab under Archuleta Mesa next to Dulce, and then he had worked there as a security person at that facility. Now, Tal Levesque claimed that he was visited by a tall reptoid at his home in Santa Fe in 1979. At that time of his passing away in 2018, he was living in Mariposa, California. In 2015, Tal Levesque made a confession to author Adam Goratley that the whole Thomas E. Costello story was a made-up story and that the whole Dulce base story itself was basically not real. Now, you can read about this in Adam Goratley's fascinating book, Saucers, spooks and kooks, UFO disinformation in the age of Aquarius. Now, it was Jason Bishop, Tal Levesque, who originally came out with the so-called underground tunnel systems map, with Dulce, New Mexico as its central hub. A few years ago, I had corresponded with Jason Bishop's relative, Carolyn Levesque of Arroyo Grande, who told me that he has always had some type of psychological problem. That is to say, a form of mental delusion, to put it mildly, and probably from indoctrination from reading so many shaver mystery science fiction novels of the 1950s that dealt with underground civilization. Now let's talk about another important personality, Thomas Edwin Costello. Of course, there are many persons with the same name. However, an alleged retired Air Force colonel who claimed that he was involved in Dulce claimed that there has never been a Thomas Edwin Costello that was ever employed as a security personnel in Dulce. The late Gabe Valdez also stated that there was never such a person connected to the alleged Dulce base. Now let's talk about another important personality, Krista Telton. Some researchers seem to say that she came to the scene slightly after Ann West. They say that Krista Telton and Tom Adams were initially partners and that she was in touch with Myrna Hanson. According to Tim Beckley, Krista Telton later on got together with Wendell Stevens. Krista Telton was said to have distributed her manuscript, The Benoit's Papers, in 1987. She claimed that she was in touch with Richard C. Doty, formerly with AFOSI at Kirtland Air Force Base in Albuquerque. Krista Telton was featured on a Japanese TV program about the Dulce base back in 1989 and 1990. Krista Telton flew over the Archuleta Mesa and over Soldier Canyon with the Junichi Aoi of Nippon TV in 1989. She appeared on Japanese TV a couple of times and claimed to have taken a photo of a circular structure over Soldier Canyon, which is slightly southwest of Dulce. Telton, in her manuscript, The Benoit's Papers, expressed her belief that the whole Thomas E. Costello story was a fabrication. Now, Ann West, in turn, reportedly claimed that Krista Telton's information was nothing more than disinformation of the highest degree. Now, let's talk about another enigmatic personality, Branton, also known as Bruce Walton, also known as Alan B. de Walton. Beginning in the early 1980s or 1990s, Branton compiled a book called the Dulce Book and also Dulce Wars. Walton allegedly got most of the information from Tal, some from John Leer, some from Val Valerian and John Grace. Now, Tal Levesque claimed that Bruce Walton was incarcerated in 2009 in Utah for felony charges. Now, you can Google search about this. Bruce Walton incarcerated in Utah. And in the next video, part 2, we're going to start talking about a very important person, Gabe Valdez. Please watch part 2. This is Norio Hayakawa in Albuquerque, New Mexico.